When you hear the name Nick Cave, you probably think of the musician, right? This towering figure, this rock poet, singing these incredible tales of love and death and God. But there is a whole other side to his art, one that's, believe it or not, even darker. Today, we're diving into Nick Cave, the novelist. I mean, his songs are practically modern psalms. They're raw, they're full of this gothic imagery, they're like sermons from a stage. We all know that voice, that persona. But what happens when you take that exact same creative energy and pour it not into a 4-minute song, but into a dense 300-page novel? Well, you get something else entirely. Because Nick Cave doesn't really just write stories. He crafts these biblical, almost hallucinatory visions, deep dives into sin and guilt, and this feeling that punishment is just inevitable. This is where we meet the true architect of his dark universe. So, we're going to be looking at his 2 major novels. Now, they were actually written 20 years apart, but you shouldn't think of them as separate stories. It's better to imagine them as 2 totally different paths that both lead to the exact same personal hell. So, what we're going to do is kind of weave these 2 books together. On one hand, you have And the Ass Saw the Angel. It's this gothic biblical fever dream. And on the other, you've got The Death of Bunny Munro, which is this really modern, darkly funny road trip straight to ruin. By putting them side by side, we can start to see the obsessions that really drive Nick Cave as a writer. Okay, so at the very heart of each book is a main character who is just spiraling towards their own destruction. And these guys aren't just characters, they're more like archetypes of suffering, and each one anchors his own bleak, terrifying world. Let's just look at the difference between these 2. You've got Euclid, a mute outcast who is literally born into a world that hates him. His suffering is something that's done to him. Bunny Munro, though, he's a self-destructive salesman who basically designs his own downfall piece by piece. One is a victim of the world, the other is a victim of himself. I mean, this one line tells you everything you need to know about Euclid. For him, life isn't just life. It's a violent, unwanted participation in a world that has been cruel to him from his very first breath. He's just a silent witness to all of it. And then you have this, which is just a brilliant way to describe Bunny. See, he isn't torn into the world. He actively tears his own world apart. His damnation isn't fate. It's a choice. He has a genius for it, like it's his art form. He is relentlessly chasing his own end. So, this massive difference in their nature, well, it leads us right into one of Cave's biggest themes. With these 2 polar opposite protagonists, both books start to wrestle with the exact same idea: guilt. You could say it's the engine that drives both of these stories. But the way that guilt shows up, whether it's projected onto you by society or it's something rotting you from the inside out, that's where these 2 novels really split apart. It's the difference between someone calling you a sinner and deep down knowing you are one. In And the Ass Saw the Angel, the writing itself feels heavy, ancient, almost like you're reading a lost book from the Old Testament. And in this world, Euclid's sin is, well, it's just existing. He's an outcast, and his very being is seen as an insult to the town's fanatical faith. So for him, guilt is a collective punishment, this massive weight the world forces him to carry. Fast forward 20 years, and the setting is totally different. It's the soulless, modern landscape of southern England. The language is sharp, it's fast, it's cynical. For Bunny Munro, guilt isn't coming from the outside. It's a prison he built for himself, brick by brick, out of addiction, an ego, and just a total inability to love. His sin is all his, and his punishment is being trapped inside his own head. So, if sin and guilt are absolutely everywhere in these books, you have to ask, where is God in all this? And that brings us to the next big theme, the nature of divine justice, or maybe the total lack of it. And this is absolutely crucial to understanding these books. Don't go looking for redemption here. Cave's Art God is not going to swoop in and save the day. He's either an absence, or even worse, he's just a silent witness to all this human suffering, leaving everyone to figure it out on their own. In And the Ass Saw the Angel, Euclid lives in a world that is obsessed with religion, but God never, ever speaks. Heaven is silent. So what happens? Judgment isn't divine. It's carried out by the cruel, fanatical townspeople. They become these twisted instruments of God's will, and Euclid's suffering becomes a symbol of a life completely abandoned by the divine.
Now, in Bunny Munro, that silence from God feels more like a modern, secular emptiness. There's no fear of divine punishment because there's no God to dish it out. The only judgment Bunny faces comes from the consequences of what he does, and, this is the most powerful part, from the silent watching eyes of his little boy, who witnesses his dad's complete moral collapse.
So what we have are two totally different settings, two different styles, and really two different kinds of hell. One feels ancient and biblical, the other is disturbingly modern. But when you really strip them down, you start to see just how similar they are. You see the work of a single obsessive vision. And you can see these contrasts so clearly when you just lay them out side by side. One is biblical, the other is cynical. One is set in this suffocating community, the other in the lonely emptiness of the open road. One is about the tragedy of fate, the other is about the tragedy of free will. And yet, even with all these opposite tools, they're both chipping away at the very same block of stone. And that right there is the whole point. It doesn't matter if the enemy is a fanatical mob outside your door or your own addictions staring back at you in the rearview mirror. For Nick Cave, the real battle is always internal. It's that relentless war that people wage against their own capacity for darkness.
To really get where these novels fit into Cave's work, it kind of helps to think about the apocryphal Gospels. These were the texts that weren't included in the official Bible, but they offer these different, often much darker perspectives on the central faith. They were like the unofficial truths.
And that is the perfect way to see this. If his songs are the official, public sermons of the Church of Nick Cave, then these novels, they're the forbidden texts. They are the deeper, the more challenging, the unvarnished truths that hold up his entire artistic world. They don't offer any light. They're written from deep inside the darkness itself.
And that's really the question that Cave leaves us with. It's the choice between Euclid's hell and Bunny's hell. What's worse, being trapped by a world that has already damned you, or being trapped by the inescapable reality of who you really are?